I was doing the accounts. I was the talk coordinator. I was doing a
Wow.
lot.
Welcome back to my channel. Wendy Renee here. So excited to have you. Today we are talking with Jared. He was an elder for 8 years. He had pioneered. He has been through so much, and he is here to share his story with you. So let's get right to it. Before we begin, I want to thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. It just goes to show that on the other side of high control religion and narcissistic abuse, there is healing and there are people who understand. And if you're just waking up to this, we are here to help you, and we are here to let you know that you are going to be okay. Jared, it is such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for volunteering your time to tell your story. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and tell us what brought you here?
Wendy, I'm honored to be a part of this episode. So, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm currently 45 years old, and I've been out of the Jehovah's Witness religion for over 3 years now. And I've partook in several different things, like on Reddit and others, looking up information, the curiosity. Obviously, I ran into your podcast that you do through Instagram, and just found the things that you said to be enlightening and refreshing. I think that people take two courses when they get out of a high control organization. They've got the very mean, vindictive, spewing fire and hate, and other people are just trying to get understanding and healing. And so I appreciate the way that you do it, where it's not very antagonistic, it's very factual, but also just wanting to hear people out as far as how it affected them. So, it's part of the healing process is me being able to actually talk about this now. So it may sound selfish, but I'm like, I want to be on here just so I can get it out too, because lots changed.
Everybody says that when they come on. And I remember before I started, just briefly, I told my story on the Living Truth channel, and I didn't even have a camera. It was just my computer, and I felt so empowered after telling that story. So, and I want that feeling for other people. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an honor. And thank you for saying that. So take us back a little bit. Were you born and raised in the religion? And just start.
Sure. I'm third generation, or was third generation. My grandmother, her parents were in Italy, immigrated here. Grandmother was born in Olean, New York. It's like south of Buffalo by about an hour and a half. And she was Catholic, and got the JWs knocked on her door because her first son had died from spinal meningitis. And the priest, of course, is religion can create hate and fear, said your son's in purgatory because you're a sinner. And of course, grandma had a good mind about herself. She's like, that doesn't make any sense. And she just quit going to the Catholic Church. And of course, some guy knocked on her door, and it just started there. That's kind of like the short version of it. But so she was going, and she had 3 more kids, which included my mom. And then mom married my dad and had me. The same thing on my dad's side over in Indiana. Grandpa came back from World War II. JWs knocked on the door, and it appealed to him more than grandma at first, because he had seen the horrors of war. He was in the Pacific, and so that message appealed to him. But then he never really got baptized. He had a hard time quitting smoking and everything. But grandma took it, and they had a bunch of kids. So dad got baptized at 11 years old. So that just lets you know. I mean, he was really into it. He escaped the draft in Vietnam because he was considered the 4-H exemption for being a minister. So it was like they were just gung-ho pioneers. And then they had me in 1977, and I've got 2 brothers that are younger than I am. One never got baptized. The other one serves as an elder, and my parents are super active at this point. I believe, from what I hear, I get pieces because obviously that connection was broken when I left. I was baptized January 17th, 1993. So I was about 15 and a half. And what's funny is the only reason I got baptized was because all my friends were doing it. I didn't even think about it. I was just like, when the thing is that when if you're a Jehovah's Witness, they put you into this isolated dome, as it were. And so your only friends are JWs. You know, I mean, you get ridiculed if you try to be friends with someone at school. And you were taught, oh, they're evil. So you listen to your parents and you're like, I'm not going to talk to anybody except for JWs. But then they start talking, especially in your teenage years, from the watchtower. They'll say, you know, if you don't make a decision to serve Jehovah and get baptized, then you're going to be destroyed at Armageddon, maybe, you know? And so there's that fear tactic, and also basically just the fear of losing my friends. I mean, these were great friends. That's the thing. It wasn't like I had a bad childhood. We had a blast. We played baseball, we played football, we rode our bikes. I mean, I miss some of those guys to this day. But you know, it's like, so you're like, well, the next step is obviously I just need to get baptized. And then it gets into the, you talk about love languages, which is kind of like a thing outside of JW. Like one of mine is affirmation. But it became,
too. Where's the affirmation?
Yeah, but it became very unhealthy because I would literally do anything I could to get affirmation from people. And it was
external validation.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And it came from that environment, you know, oh, look, Jared, you did such a good job on that presentation. And you're like, oh, and then, oh, look at the talk you gave. And this is at a very young age. I remember giving a talk when I was like 9 years old, and people were like, that was amazing. And so then what's the next step? Baptized. What's the next step? Oh, well, you need to be a ministerial servant, a pioneer. Right. So you just go, you know, you go through all these things, and it's just it's a high, like, wow, I'm being validated. I'm doing good. And of course, because they tie in their doctrine the works equaling salvation, you just like, well, this is easy. It's a formula. And I'm very formalistic in a lot of things, especially where I work at. It's like, if I do X, Y happens. So it's like, hey, if I go door to door, I get a certain number of hours, become a ministerial servant, maybe I'll get the best sister when I get married, you know, and
that's always the end goal as part of it anyway. Let me ask you a question about words of affirmation. I'm curious to see if this was the same for you. As much as external validation was needed when it came to good things, and that the reward center of the brain, and you're on that loop of reward and punishment, did the criticism also impact you? So if they said what you have to work on, if they verbally said what you have to work on, you took that to heart just as much as you took the positive
Absolutely.
things.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what's interesting is I read later on, because you can actually read books that aren't published by the JWs when you get out.
It's crazy, right?
I know. I read this book, I'm Okay, You're Okay. And it talks about good strokes and bad strokes. Like, you know, and it like hit me hard because I thought about it as like, there was times where I would act out because I wanted that affirmation. It came in school, especially because you don't really have much to show out in school because one, you know, I was in school in the 80s, graduated high school in 95. So that period of time, you know, the end was coming. That was the generation of the magazine that had the generation that will not pass away. My family telling me, you're not even going to go. Why even? Don't worry about college. Don't worry. You know, they just tell you stuff. And so you're like, yeah, makes sense to me. Great. Don't have to. I mean, what young teenager want to hear? I don't have to worry about anything.
I mean, I graduated high school in 98. The 90s as a JW, I don't even recognize that religion now.
Yeah. So the affirmation and everything was so important, but it was sometimes negative things because it was, oh, why is Jared having to go out of the classroom because they were doing a birthday or Thanksgiving or Christmas or Valentine's Day? You know, even when they did sex ed later on, it was like, couldn't be in there. So I remember how devastating it was because, you know, they separated the girls from the boys, and I would be in the gym playing basketball or volleyball with all the girls. And you talk about being picked on tremendously. You just got to think about, there wasn't a culture of acceptance back then. The culture was very brutal. So you couldn't be who you wanted to be. And I was just wanting to be a normal kid that was liked. And they're like, oh, why are you with the girls? You know, that kind of thing. And kids can be very cruel. It impacted me. It gave me self-esteem issues that I even deal with to this day. But, you know, so it's like I would act out just to get something. Like I remember I lit a firecracker in the library in elementary school. And I did stupid stuff. My parents were like, why do you keep doing this stupid stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. But looking back on it, it was like, I just wanted some attention. You know, and I equated attention with being accepted and then ultimately being loved. And there's a whole side thing with that because my father was not very vocal in his love, and he was I will say that I think it was like I was 19 or 20 and going over to my mom's house after work and sitting in the chair and just sitting there. And she's like, "Why are you crying?" And I was like, Dad's never said he loved me. And it was like, it was devastating at that time, because that's what you want. It doesn't matter how your parents raise you. Like, that's your flesh and blood, mom and dad. That's what you want. And mom, of course, her side was all Italian, and it was love and hugs and kisses from all the aunts and uncles. And you got all that you wanted there. And then my dad. And my dad just, he loved us in a different way. I'm not saying right or wrong. It was just, that's how he was raised by his father, who was cold-hearted from the war. And so dad was actually much better than my grandfather when I found out, other details. Anyway,
did he have a position in the congregation? Because he was obviously raised by the organization as
yeah.
well. Third generation.
Yeah, he was in the past. It's funny. When I was about 5 years old, he became completely burned out and stepped down and never went to meetings. Dad was go to the memorial, and that was it. And we made life living hell for my mother because we wanted dad there. And you saw your friends like, oh, they've got it. Again, it's all a competition. Like, well, their dad's an elder, or dad's doing that. And then it wasn't shunning, but it was like you weren't included as much because you weren't part of the spiritually strong families. So you were the outcasts, and we were kind of like the outcast family.
Well,
and mom would even,
orphan.
Yeah.
We call it back then.
Yeah. So my uncle stepped in. He passed away a few years ago, but he stepped in and became my spiritual father in that time. He was an amazing man, very smart, super intelligent. So he kind of replaced that and helped us get along. But again, it was just, you just thought this is just how it is. You didn't know anything different when you're growing up, and there's no internet. You literally have no way to check the facts.
Right. That's right. So, and if you thought anything was off, that was your problem. There's something wrong with you. I always thought there was something wrong. I had an interview with someone yesterday. We talked about our personality types. And I don't know if you've ever done Myers-Briggs, but I am an INFJ. I'm EI. I can be extroverted. Sometimes it's rare, but the intuitive part, the intuition part, it was always this. And he had such an excellent point. He was from a different cult, and he had an interesting point where he said, that was what we call intuition. We thought was Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And, right. If you got a bad vibe about somebody, you're like, oh, this is the Holy Spirit. But if you made a decision or felt a certain way that was contrary to doctrine, what was it? Was it Satan? Because it's not Holy Spirit. And that's what intuition felt like. It felt very foreign.
The intuition, right? But everything, you always gave credit to Holy Spirit or everything. And that's kind of, whenever you want to get to that point, that helped me wake up, because I argued that point with individuals when I was ready to just be done with all of this, like Holy Spirit versus the skills that you've developed as a human.
Now, you mentioned that you said systems, you liked systems. Was the religion for you a cerebral thing, or did you find that the emotion was what had most, it has a hold on us in every sense, but was it more of a cerebral doctrinal following versus emotional? What was the strongest pull on you, do you think?
I'm glad you brought that up, because it switched. We talk about growing up in the 90s. Remember all the types and antitypes and the prophecies, and man, you'd study Revelation, you'd have the all scripture inspired book. I was a study fool.
I was I commented. I was a pioneer, but had no idea what I was.
Okay.
I still don't know.
I don't know anymore. But back in the day, I prided myself because my uncle was like a scholar with Greek and Hebrew. He didn't just have JW stuff, but he had all the other. He was just a very intelligent man. And he would show me, this is how you study. And he helped me how to study, not just for meetings, but how to study anything. Almost like he valued education. He was kind of like an outlier, like a bad guy, because, he got his education was a pharmacist. So, he was a little bit different, but so it was very cerebral for me in the beginning, because I just enjoyed the meat. I love to dig. I would read the insight books. I'd had them by my bed. I would read them.
I brought the reference Bible to the meetings. I thought that was important or something.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore, though. It's not, I mean, they've dumbed it down significantly.
It was so bad when I was when I was leaving. It was about, honestly, it was about 2005 or six where I was like, I was married at the time. And that's a whole nother story of how things are, maybe I'd still be married. I don't know, but how it went from cerebral to this emotional manipulation. My mother loved it. My mom loved the emotional aspects of it. Whereas I didn't like to be emotionally manipulated, and it just turned into a feel good thing. And I'm like, I'm not learning anything. I wouldn't study. I hate to use the term nag. My ex-wife would nag me. Why aren't you studying? And I'd be like, because I can go to the meeting and I can literally answer better than everybody in the congregation. This isn't arrogance. It's just, they think they're smart. They are not. I mean,
well, you're programmed to think it's arrogance,
yeah,
but really we're not advancing here. We're not learning new information. It's nothing's new.
Right. I was like, yeah, I know. I mean, it's like the question, look for the question in a different form in the paragraph. There's the answer. Raise your hand. It was like, and it was like, I'm not learning anything. And I would like try to study my own, but they kept saying, well, this book, I remember one family worship, we threw away all this literature that was in our library that we collected that I felt was very valuable, because you're like this old light. So just throw it in the trash. I'm like, I kind of felt gypped. I was like, I spent so much time learning all this and you're telling me it doesn't matter anymore. And now it's it just made a change. And now with the videos, it's become very emotional. And that's my the video. There was a video that's actually how I woke up, how I came to where I'm at today. I went through many different phases, and I was like the golden child of this little congregation, because it was a small congregation. It wasn't a big city. And it was like little Jared was always little Jared. I got married. I've been married twice. The first time my wife cheated on me like 8 months into our marriage, and she left. And of course I was like, how dare you? Oh, and everything. So everybody kind of, surrounded me. And then I got immediately involved in another relationship very quickly. And I think that's the side point of that. They don't teach you how to deal with things, how to emotionally heal. They just put it off to the paradise. Like, I don't need to eat healthy. I'll just wait till I lose my 100 pounds in the paradise. Or, you know what? The paradise will fix my depression and the paradise will fix that. And I'm like, it almost like we don't work on the things that we could work on now. So it's just like, well, I guess I'll just get married again because, I had tasted the forbidden fruit. And so I just, didn't want to sin again. So like there's so many marriages, and I was an elder. I went from Pioneer, and then, this was after the divorce. I was like, you know what? I worked full-time, pioneered. Then I became a ministerial servant. And then it was in 2006. So I was like 29. I got appointed as an elder. And I was doing stuff I shouldn't be doing. Like, you're 29 years old. I don't think you're really mature enough to be handling some of the deep stuff that goes on, like the emotional problems that couples are facing. And, I was married, but it was like, they had me, I was a secretary at one time. I was the service overseer. They wanted to make me the at the time, the presiding overseer, because my uncle was the PO and he got sick. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I actually said, no, I can't do that. It was like, but it was that pressure, that battle of affirmation. I mean, holy crap, Jared's doing this. And then you might give a part on the assembly. So it was like, I was the, it was a spiritual giant in their eyes. Like, wow, he's an amazing story and just could do no wrong. Like, I was the perfect guy. But meanwhile, I'd gotten married again, and behind the scenes, I was a terrible husband. I neglected my wife. We fought all the time, and it was brutal, because then you just got to go to the meeting and smile. And, I got involved in, it wasn't like extramarital affair or anything, but it was like, I just started looking at pornography because, she wasn't much into the sex anymore. And it was just like don't tell anybody. I had a close friend, actually, at the time. He was an elder, and he had a problem with pornography, went to the elders, and they disfellowshipped him over it. and it caused his wife to wake up and leave. And it's like so I kept it hidden, and then she found it, and instead of like talking to me about it, she went straight to the elders. So I get a call from the elders, hey, we know what you've done. She showed us proof. And so I got removed as an elder 2013. And but I worked my way back, because I had to have that. I had to have that again. And then it was I was working at the conventions. I worked in the audio video department, and it was the 2015 convention. I don't know if you remember where the families in the basement with all the friends, and the army busts the door down, the manipulation there.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That video. It
all
still
right.
haunts me.
No, but see, I was still in. I was like, oh yeah, I was digging it. I was.
I was too, and that's
sickening.
Because I'm an audiovisual as well, because movies have such an impact on. I was a lonely kid, so movies were my escape, and so now that they're making these movies, it really, really got to me emotionally. But continue.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. It's nice to hear somebody sharing similar things, because I'm like, well, maybe I'm the weirdo, but
no, everyone who talks about that video, and I think they made it as a series.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you didn't know how it was going to end, and that's when the arrow, like at the end where Jesus is coming, and he's
and you remember the old guy where his wife played his daughter played the violin.
Yes.
Okay. So that guy looked just like my uncle, and my uncle had passed away right before that convention. And I'm talking about, I was bawling watching it, because I love that man. I did his memorial talk, and I remember it was such an honor and privilege. But here's the thing, I was kind of like, should I even do this? Because I was just a ministerial servant. I hadn't made it back to elder. And think about it, it's like I was just so hyper focused on that and not taking care of the important things. But anyway. So that video played, and then you remember the video at the very end where they played that beautiful music. It was like a piano piece, and they're walking on the beach in slow motion.
Yes, the beach. Okay, yes.
The beach. All right.
I don't remember the music, but I remember the beach.
Remember this. You can link it if you want to do it in your podcast or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that music was done by Audio Machine. And they make music for all the violent video games that are out there, like Call of Duty and others. And so this song was called Eternal Flame. And how do I know that? Well, let me go back to, I hear this song and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was a beautiful song. And my mom, who's very emotionally tied into these things, because she had lost her mom. Grandma had passed away a few years before that, but I don't think she ever got over it. So she's like, I know you're probably not supposed to do this. We're going to wait for it to come out on the channel, but is there any way you could get me that song? So guess what I did? Me being curious, I went to the internet and I was like, I looked for it and I found it on YouTube. And there was a comment down there. It was like, yeah, this is by Audio Machine. And I went dead at that point. And here's why. Because my whole life, I was raised, everything in the world is bad. Wasn't allowed to listen to worldly music. I would sneak, me and my brother would take old Watchtower and Awake cassettes. I don't know if you have to explain to some of the listeners about this, but cassette tapes. I love being Gen X because I know how to do everything. I can relate to anybody. I love it. No.
I put my book of Bible stories in Teddy Ruxpin. Don't tell me about.
Yes. Oh, yeah. How about you? You are super spiritual. But so I took the Watchtower and Awake and I put the piece of tape over the tab that had been broken off.
Yes.
We would sit up at night and record songs off the radio. Well, then it got better. Grandma got a dual cassette deck player. And so we would borrow it. And we would tell her, yeah, we love listening to music. And she's like, okay, whatever. And she'd be out on the porch. We would go to the library and we had our own library card. And I remember I got out the Van Halen album for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Why would you choose anything else, Jeff?
Exactly. And I'm like, I dubbed it because back then nobody really dubbed anything. And it was like, and it was like passing around the congregation, Jared's got the Van Halen album, But it's like, so then one time Grandma, I don't know what happened. She grabbed a Watchtower that was not a Watchtower. It was I think it was Bismarcky or LL Cool J or something. Oh man, we got in trouble. But anyway, but that's just an example of like we were taught everything was so bad. Couldn't watch movies, couldn't do this. You know, it was like you could only watch certain things that were rated properly. So it was like I was like, it was a WTF, and I don't want to cuss on your podcast unless you're okay with that. But okay, it was a what the fuck moment for me. Right. I literally said that because I was just like, why are they doing this? They have an orchestra. Why did they buy somebody else's music? Well, then, of course, I was like, let me research some more. So I put in this video, and then something else came up, and it was Jehovah'sWitnesses.net. And they started talking about it, how they bought footage like the girl walking through the wheat field. If you can get yourself to actually go back and look at those things, because they're still out there, that wasn't even a sister. That was an actress. It was footage they bought. And the dress looked beautiful on here, but obviously it was very immodest by JW standards, right? And people were commenting on it like, wow, they put that in there? Because again, we're taught so much that you have to do things a certain way, and we're confined to these rules. And then they broke all these rules in the video, and I'm like, what the heck? So I put it away. I was like, cognitive dissonance set in, and I was like, no, this can't be right. And it was like having these scared thoughts. I got away from it, and then I was like, what am I going to do about this? And I pushed it away. Well, Mom, in the meantime, wanted this thing. So I was like, yeah, I ripped it off. I used Firefox and ripped the MP3 off of the YouTube video, and she loved listening to it.
I use Napster and LimeWire.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. This was a little bit after that, but I remember those two. Yeah. So yeah, that was, I did that. And then I said, you know what? I had I'm an iPhone person. So I bought the Apple Music. I bought their album. And I remember I was out in field service with my mom, and it was my ex-wife, and I forget who else was in the car. Doesn't matter. And I said, isn't this a great song? And I was like, but I said, this isn't from us. And you got to look at, after we're done with this, look up Audio Machine and tell me what you think about some of their album covers. I think they're cool, but if you were like JW, it'd be like, what the hell? Yeah, I don't know.
Something happened recently where there was a famous musician. I forget his name. If you're watching this and I don't know his name, by the time this is posted, I'll figure it out, and it's in the description box. But he had a Christmas album. Do you know about this?
Yes. I know you're talking about.
And it was all over YouTube. It went viral.
Yeah.
And it was a JW song.
And he put a JW song in his Christmas album.
On his Christmas album.
Yeah, he's from Ireland or UK or something.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I was like, wait a second, does he own the copyright?
Yeah.
How can he do
Weird,
this?
huh? Yeah. I know.
Which means that if that's the case, if the Watchtower organization copyrighted a song, that means they're getting royalties if somebody borrowed it. Which means this is
follow the trail. I could spend hours talking about all this stuff because I mean I researched the hell out of everything. You know, that's part of the story of waking up. But the Audio Machine it kind of kept bothering me. Well, then I'm at work, and of course, everybody knew I was a Jehovah's Witness. I was kind of low key. The one thing that I never did is I didn't wear it like a badge of honor on my chest. I didn't like confrontation, so I would just try to avoid everything. I was the guy at the football game that would just go and get popcorn during the national anthem.
Blend in as much as possible.
Yeah, I was like, if I had to do that, it would be brutal. But so I was at work one day, and this guy came up to me, and he's like, you know, you act all good and mighty and everything. And I've heard you talk a lot of trash about Catholics and child sexual abuse and everything. It says, you guys are no better. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, we handle it. We don't allow that stuff. And he's like, look up ARC, the Australian Royal Commission. And so I was like, sure, why not? You know, because I was kind of, that cognitive dissonance had blocked me, but I was like, well, I saw one crack. Why not? Let me just see if there's something else.
Or you watch it to think, well, there's got to be a reason for it.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
I can explain my way out of this.
Yeah, exactly. So I watched it, and I was like, I remember watching it and going into my office and shutting my door in my house and crying. I cried like a baby for about an hour. I mean, like ugly cry. Like I was like, I've been lied to. And of course, then I said, well, maybe this isn't right. You know, there was bad people back in the day, right? If you go by the Bible. I said there was evil people, there was apostates. But then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, they're going to think I'm the apostate because of this. Well, I ran into a website called jwfacts.com. And JWFacts to me that is the site that I will tell anybody is like, go there, because it's not anybody's opinion. It's literally just tons of stuff that's been scanned. And then people are like, well, they used Photoshop. And I'm like, no, because my uncle had all the books and I would pull up all the old books. My dad actually collects books. So he had all these studies in the scriptures from, Russell and Rutherford. So he had all those books. I could literally go there and I was like, wait a minute, they got the Eye of Horus on the front of their book. You know,
what was that like for you when you're looking at the very literature you have? Because I had the bound volumes going back through the 2000s and the 90s, but nothing that was on JWFacts, so I couldn't compare it. What was that like for you, seeing that you had it in your hand, seeing it on JWFacts, and then looking at it with completely different eyes?
It was well, again, I'm very black and white in my personality too. And it was that point I was like, wow, I've been lied to and this is all bullshit. And that was 2015, 2016. So I didn't actually put in my letter of disassociation until 2019.
It took you years to
it took me 3 years because I loved my family so much. And I was like, I couldn't leave them. There was literally, I just was like, I'll just play the game. I literally played the game for 3 years.
As a ministerial servant, or
as a ministerial servant. In fact, I was about to be made an elder when I finally says nope.
Did you have PMO? Were you PMO for a while too?
Oh, yeah, I was physically and mentally out. Can I
ask what that's like? Because there's a lot of buzz going around trying to. I was PMO for all of 2 seconds, but I didn't have a position in the congregation. I had moved away from my family, so for me to go POMO immediately, I was at a point mentally and emotionally where I could, and that's not the case for everybody. But to have a position of leadership and be PMO at the exact same time, trying to understand what that's like, because it's not true, but yet now you're leading people and teaching them that it still is. Can you explain what goes on in your mind to be doing those things? Because we do it. I talk to PMO elders, and they're in because of their families.
It was awful. I was taking Lexapro for anxiety, and let me just say that I don't think that we still don't address mental illness at the level that we should. But even in the JW world, it's like, well, you just need to do more spiritual things and you won't be as depressed. I mean, my mother was in the hospital for like a half a year when I was a kid because of depression, and my grandmother raised us for that time. So my family all has mental illness issues and they've tried to cope with it. And I remember an elder telling my mom, if you went out in service, you probably wouldn't be depressed. And it just devastated my mom, because she just has this complex of never being good enough. And she still feels that way. I attribute the way
so you say your family has a history of mental illness.
Yes.
But you're third generation JW.
Yeah. Right. I know. There's a correlation there.
Exactly. Now, I'm not a mental health expert, but there is so much unresolved trauma in that JW community that it's amazing, because once you do leave, that's one of the first things to clear up.
Yeah, I didn't have resolution with the trauma till later. So yeah, being physically in and mentally out was absolutely horrible. It made everything a drudgery. It caused the marriage to go downhill because I didn't want to be a part of anything. And she knew it. She was like, you don't care about this anymore. And I was like I'd bring things up. I was like, but what about this? I would say this literally happened. I would show her stuff and she would just shut down. She never told anybody.
So she was PME, and now you're awake as a ministerial servant on your second marriage, trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
Not wanting to get divorced again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It must have rocked your world, being a prisoner in your own body.
It was devastating to me. It was brutal. And again, like I said, I wasn't a good husband. I'll admit that, I was just, because I couldn't function, and I would just try to go through the motions. We'd go on shepherding calls, and I will say that I have a great deal of empathy for people. I'm very empathetic, and it has nothing to do with being a JW in the past. It's just who I am. And I think it's because of how my grandmother was. I admired her because she always tried to help people. So that's how I am. And it's actually freeing now because I'm not held into the bounds of JW. I can actually be kind and be a human to anybody that I choose to be.
Isn't that interesting how that happens? You think you're compassionate and empathic on the inside, and then on the outside you realize, boy, do I have a lot to learn about those things.
Oh yeah. I had no idea, because I was like, oh wait, wow, you mean there's other people that care about people outside here? Wow.
And here's the thing, this is interesting when you think about atheists. I don't identify as anything because I just I don't know. And that's me. I'm a big question mark. But you think people who identify as atheists, and the reason why I say this is because I know quite a few people who say they're atheists and are the most giving, kind, compassionate people. And they do things out of the goodness of their hearts because they want to, not because they're held to a higher powers standard.
They're not doing it to please.
So fascinating. Yes, I find that so fascinating because they're not doing it because they're subject to any rule. Except for the rule of their own moral compass. I find that to be fascinating.
It is very fascinating. It is very fascinating, and I agree with you on that. It's an amazing thing. The thing that's where it's gotten to going through the time period was what caused it go from physically and mentally out to physically out, mentally out. Was just, it was honestly, it was like the marriage, and I was like, I'm like wasting my time. When you realize there's no paradise earth. I'm not going to get into theology about the afterlife, because honestly, who knows? I'm of the sort that I do believe there's a higher power. I was like, I don't know how all this stuff happened, but there's scientific proof like things happened the way they happened. But like the earth in billions of years is going to be gone, because that's just what's going to happen. We can't comprehend billions of years, but it sure is a heck of a lot smaller than infinity. So it's like, well, this is it, that I was told my whole life I'm going to go into the paradise as a young man. I mean, I've got gray in my beard and I'm 45, and I feel like, well, if I'm lucky, I've got maybe half of my life left, but probably not. So what am I doing with it? I think I started asking, what am I doing with my life? I am pouring water into a barrel that has holes in it. And it was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I don't want to get too detailed because it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. It's just more of, the marriage got to the point where I was like, I'm done with this. I can't do this anymore. And there was no sign of her trying to wake up. And I was like, so I just said, I did a complete Hiroshima atomic gone, everything. I wrote a letter. I went and got an attorney. I did it all like within 2 weeks. Done.
You lit it on fire.
And I remember I went over to my parents' house. It was the second week in May, because I actually celebrated my birthday in secret. And that was my first birthday, May 5th. But seriously, I remember going to my parents, and I just said, and they knew some of my questions because I had talked to them. I just thought maybe they're going to be like some parents, because I have a couple of friends that left and their parents still meet with them on the down low. They're like, there's no way I'm not going to talk to my children. Wow. Well, not my parents. I remember I went to mom and dad's and I told them, I says, I just want to let you know that I put a letter in and I'm done, and I love you both. And I remember dad said, well, we love you too, son, and we're sorry that you've made this decision. And they gave me a hug, and mom sat in the kitchen and cried, and I left and drove away. And that's the last time.
Let me ask you this, back up for 1 second. So you had been disfellowshipped before?
No.
And you weren't disfellowshipped?
No. Yeah, okay, it was my friend that got disfellowshipped. They did private reproof for me.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I was only curious how your parents had treated you when you were disfellowshipped. So the mentality of disassociating within the community, there are so many different viewpoints of this. I only recently disassociated, and everyone has a different view on it. For you personally, what was it that made you disassociate rather than just POMO?
Gotcha. Great question. And I want to put a disclaimer here that I don't say that there's a wrong or a right way to do any of this.
There's not.
There's not.
It's very variable. Right.
But for me, I had to do it that way, because if not, then it'd be no different than me still being physically and mentally out.
Even if ministerial servant, while even
if I faded, like if I did a soft fade, I'm still connected to them. And I'd still have to look over my back and go, are they going to see me if I celebrate my birthday or Christmas or whatever? Because I wanted to do these things. Mm-hmm. Are they going to look over my shoulder when I'm out with my girlfriend, having a nice dinner? And, so it was like, no, I was like, I just want to clean. Let's pull this Band-Aid off. And that was how I got the most peace from it. Now, was it easy? Initially, it was like, crap. Did I ever say I want to come back? Not really. Once I know something is wrong, and once I know something is completely wrong and there's no way to explain it, then it's done. I'm not very forgiving in that area. That could be the Taurus side or whatever, but it's like I give people, I will give you 300 feet of rope. I probably hold on to things much longer than I should, but exactly. That's why it shocks people. People were like, what the fuck, Jared?
Yeah, because you went from, you are still a servant when you just associate.
I was a servant. I was doing the accounts. I was the talk coordinator. I was doing a lot. In fact, it was like 2 weeks after the circuit overseer visit where they put me in to be an elder.
It just goes to show none of it actually matters. When you wake up,
no. It's
okay to just walk away.
Yeah.
And it took you so long to reconcile that. And thank you for explaining the mind of someone who is PMO while having responsibilities in the congregation, because you really needed to kind of play it safe. You really needed to get your shit together while you're figuring out an exit plan. I think that is so important. And it sounds like it wasn't actually an emotional decision for you to just leave.
No, it was not emotional. It was very cold. It was, I think my parents probably, that's maybe why it was such a shock to them, because it was literally just like, I was like, nope, done, the wife, everything done, just done. And, it's something that I don't regret, because I have peace now, but it's taken me a while to get there for two reasons. One, I was on a tear. Like I joined every Reddit group and everything I could to disclaim JWs. I went and, they have these business cards. I'm pretty decent at Photoshop.
I've seen them in bathrooms. Like,
oh yeah. So I basically, I went to a print shop and I designed some that looked just like it. And I printed 1,000 of them that took you, when you scan the QR code, it takes you to JW Fax instead of jw.org. I mean, I went to gas stations in the morning on the weekend. I would tell anybody that could, I was like, can't stand them all and they're evil and everything. And even some of the people that I was with, I kind of had to stop being around because I never healed. I was like, I'm not saying it's wrong to be angry. I think that it's very justified. In fact, my anger and hatred is still there for the leaders. There are so many good people that are Jehovah's Witnesses, beautiful people.
Yeah, I still come in and out of it, full stop. And this is what I say, anger is not a bad, because in the religion, you're taught anger is a bad emotion. Yeah. It's work of the devil, right? But anger overturns laws, right? Mm-hmm. Anger, it's not the fact that we're angry, because anger is a secondary emotion to fear and sadness, right? Yeah. So when we have anger, it's not that we're angry, it's what we do with that anger that matters for our own health. So what did healing look like for you? How did you go from married as an MS, disassociated, to where you're at now in this place of holistic, what sounds like harmony and peace? How did that happen?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One was at work, they put this poster on the board that they were providing mental health counseling. And I was like, never thought about that because that's not good. You just need to read your Bible more. I think anybody that's going to be watching this needs to understand too. It's like, it's okay if you're still carrying things that are in you from being a JW. Like I still think a certain way because guess what? That tree grew a certain way for over 40 years. I can't all of a sudden go, nope, all that's gone. It's like they still have those like people like, why did you act that way there? And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, it was like the old JW coming up. But even the fear of going to someone who's actually went to school and been professionally trained on how to help you with serious mental issues. So yeah, I signed up for it. The guy met with me and he's like, I'm going to put you with this counselor and they're going to do an analysis of you. And it came back that I got the report and I was like, holy crap. I remember even showing it to my girlfriend. I was like, she's like, wow. And it was, I had severe childhood trauma and severe PTSD. I was diagnosed with it because, you know, I think sometimes those terms get tossed around and some people don't take them seriously, but have somebody who clinically diagnosed me with that. I just sat there and I was like, wow. I felt like I'd been trying to go through life and I had one arm tied behind my back because I didn't address it, you know? It's almost like you see a deer out in the woods with one leg that's been torn off by a trap or something happened and it doesn't know, you know, they don't have that type of conscience. So they're just still trying to find food and they don't realize they could be running more efficiently with 4 legs. But I was the same way. And so getting the therapy was a tremendous help. The other thing that I had to unpack was that I was abused by a family member sexually when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And it was something that happened that I didn't even unpack until last year. Like it helped me to go, this is why I feel like I'm screwed up sexually sometimes because of what happened to me when I was a child. And it's like I would like get blamed for being bad. And I'm like, I didn't know why. I was like, you know, I don't know. It's weird. The human body, the mind can like bury something so deep and it's no longer there until somebody pulls the dirt away and goes, look at what we found. And the therapist helped me to get that out there. And you know what's interesting is actually I did send an email to my parents and I put the PDF in there from the report. And I said, I just want you to know I went to therapy and this is what they found. They didn't even reply to the email. They didn't even ask who was the family member that sexually abused me. It was just kind of like, so when that happened last year, I was like my parents died at that moment because I don't know, you know, I still love them, but how can you be that calloused? How can you just go, I don't even want to act like that happened. So that's it's okay. I know what I'm dealing with now. And you know what? I'm very open about it. And I don't expect everybody to be that way. I know some people that never want to talk about it, but I'll tell you what, if you do want to talk about it, find someone that you trust and you'll find out that so many people have went through that so many people have been abused by family members or a close friend of the family. And you go, wow, a lot of people have went through that. And I'm not saying it's good.
Earlier, when we were growing up in the organization, you couldn't read about this stuff
on
the internet. You didn't know it was happening. Me too. I think I've spoken about it before. My whole life, I was the crazy one. I was the crazy one, the dramatic one, the storyteller. I don't need her validation that it happened.
That's
I know
right.
It did.
That's right.
In that moment, I knew I don't need you guys to accept me anymore. No. I don't need you to admit that it happened to me. I know it happened to me, and that's enough for me. And for someone who grew up needing external validation from everyone, it was like, I don't know what to think. What do you think? I don't know what to think of me. What do you think of me? That's how bad I was. For someone who needed external validation, that was such a changing moment for me. I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me know that. We're not unique. It's not lessening the value of our stories, but it's letting you know that we all have similar traumas because that's what they do to you.
Yes.
There's no individuality in that organization. I talked about like the healing process. Now it's like, what do I like? What do I want to do? You know, I went, there was a group last year in November. So I dabbled into, and I feel this need to, this God thing, if you want to call it that. And I got to be careful. There's a lot of, and I have no problem with it. I love the atheists just as much as anybody. it's just like, but you can get ridiculed based on how you feel about certain things. So I went on a mission trip because it was called Breaking Bread Ministries. And it wasn't really religious to me. It was more of like, there was a family that needed a house built that was destroyed in a hurricane in Puerto Rico. And I was like, and it was nice. And I enjoyed doing it. And the cool thing is there was people of different races working together for a common purpose. But then it was like afterwards, like, let's go have some fun, eat some Mexican food. And it was just weird. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I says, it validated too that I made a good decision, because guess what? JWs aren't the only ones that have a monopoly on different races working together for a common purpose.
Yes. And interestingly, what I noticed is that there are people who need to eat right now. There are homeless people right now. There are people, you can't eat biblical information, right?
That's right.
It's not going to keep you warm in the coldest of winters.
Yeah.
These are the things that really bothered me when I was in.
It's terrible. It'd be like, oh, here's a scripture. It'll keep you well and warm fed.
It's not going to feed me.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Well, when I was physically and mentally out, I was an attendant one night, and I was guarding the back entrance, or the foyer, whatever, where people come in. And this guy comes up all disheveled, and they're like, go see what he wants. And I went out there, and I was like, hey, how you doing? And the thing is that I had woken up to the point where I was like, I was me at that point. I was literally just hiding under that name for that last little bit. Anyway, he's like, I ran out of gas, and I was just saying, well, maybe y'all look like a church that maybe somebody could help me out. And I was like, here's $20. And I gave him $20 on my wallet and said, here you go. And of course, when I came in, everybody asked me what happened when I told them. And I remember it was two elders. They were like, why did you do that? And I was like, it was more confirmation. Like, I need to get out of here because these people are fucked up. Because it's like, you don't have any.
For you, that was nice of you.
Yeah, like there was no true concern. Everything. That's the other problem that I've had to work on, is I felt like JW life taught me how to be manipulative, whether I want to call it that or not, because you would manipulate, you were taught to hone in on, oh, look at what they have in their yard, or, oh, they're divorced, or, oh, they're going through a health problem.
Yes.
And so it wasn't really empathy. It was, how can I use this in order to get the truth down their throats? And the reason you wanted the truth down their throats, let's face it, you didn't care whether they came in or not, because you were like, well, I'm going to take that house in the paradise. Heard that many times from people door to door, right? And you're like, I'm appalled by it. People would say that.
I know.
But it's like you hear all those things, and it's just like, wow.
When you look at the reasoning book,
yeah,
you had conversation stoppers. There were pages of what to say and how to convince them. Look at the BE book. It's one of the greatest marketing books written of all time. I'm
good at my job because of some of the things that I learned. I'll admit it. I mean,
why do you think I'm good at YouTube and public speaking?
I have no college degree, and I'm a national training manager for a global company, and thank you. I'm proud of it, and I'm like, but it goes back to, I mentioned earlier about the Holy Spirit and everything, and it's like, yeah, well, there's a lot of people. You're like, why is the Holy Spirit not helping them? Because they're terrible. There was people that get on the stage and you're like, oh my goodness, they can't speak. They're terrible. Right. It's like, oh no, not brother so-and-so, right. Or they give these comments, and I'm like, well, but they're faithful. So why is the Holy Spirit not helping them to speak better? And it's just life. There are people that have different talents. Everybody has a talent. It's just, everybody's different, but they would associate it with spirituality. Like, a good speaker meant they were very spiritual. And that's farther from the truth, because look, I was looking at pornography the morning I would go and nail an amazing talk at a visiting congregation, right? Wow. And I remember telling the elders that, because they tried to convince me when they saw that I was really waning. They were like, I said, this Holy Spirit thing, I don't understand. I says, I can go and do all this. And they really didn't have an answer. And the other thing, it was like, I remember praying to Jehovah, like antagonistically. Because there was people, and if you read in the Bible, they were antagonistic, like, prove me wrong or show me whatever. I remember like being in the shower, like saying, just give me a sign that all this is just a dream and that I'm wrong. I want
the same thing.
I know. I want this to all be wrong. Like, because why am I going through this?
Oh my God. I said the same thing. Like, if you're real, I need you to show yourself, like, right now. And I remember watching the 10 Commandments when I was a kid. I think it was the 10 Commandments, but it was watching Jesus. It wasn't a JW movie, obviously, because I was young, but I remember being impacted by Jesus saying, why have you forsaken me? And I was like, if Jesus himself feels a little like, Dad, what's in here? Where are you? I felt justified in saying, yes, you do owe me an explanation. Yes, you do need to show yourself. And I don't know who this governing body is, but wherever you are, your son has no part of this organization.
Yeah.
My theory was, and this is what I thought, because I was so drawn to Jesus as I was waking up. And I think a lot of people are. But I want to say, I know this is going to sound cheesy, but I felt called out of the organization and I couldn't reconcile that. So I remember thinking, why is the governing body taking the place of Jesus? Like, who are they to kind of give Jesus barely an honorable mention? It really bothered me. And then you ask Apini who their mediator is. I know I thought it was Jesus, and it's not. No. Jesus is the mediator just for the anointed.
That's right.
No Pinis actually believe that. In fact, when you leave that organization, tell me if this is true in your case.
Yeah.
You were an elder. You were an avid researcher. Did you learn more about the organization on the outside than you did on the inside?
Oh, absolutely. I was like, wow, I didn't realize we believed that. You know, like, holy crap. Yeah, right. It's so true, because you're just on autopilot. You go, you listen. I mean, you know, the pressure of trying to go to all these meetings, and then you got to study, and you know, then you if you're raising children, I mean, all of that, and it's like, and it's never enough. It's never good enough. That's why I have a problem with most organized religion, because it's all like a guilt game, and they're wanting you to be on this treadmill. And I'm like, well, if you really believe in grace, then what does it matter? You just do the best you can.
And it's just like corporate. That's the thing. Yeah,
it's very corporate in a lot of ways.
If it's all about forgiveness and love, there's none of that. It's so business. It's so.
And the JW has become so business-like. It wasn't like that in the 90s. No. It changed.
I think their downfall was showing the governing body as televangelists. I mean, when I was a kid in the 90s, like, you didn't even know. They referred to it as the faithful slave. They never said the governing body every other sentence as they do now. And so I thought it was like, oh, okay, Jehovah's talking to the governing body. Okay, we're going to write this down. Like, I really thought that was the relationship between between the faithful slave. And now the faithful slave isn't even the governing body. Like, what? Like, this is not the religion I grew up in.
Yeah, but it's so true what you're saying, because I remember I tried at one point emailing my dad and mom, and I was like, I found something on one of the websites. It was like 10 scriptures that show why shunning isn't biblical. And I was like, so I sent them to him, and I remember Dad just wrote back. He's like, we have to be loyal to the governing body and Jehovah. It was like they put it in that order. Like, you know, like, you can't just say Jehovah, because if you read in the Bible, there's nothing that says that would support that action. And yet, because that's the thing, it's like, I'm not even here to discuss whether you believe in the Bible or not. I'm like, let's just use the Bible that they use, and you can totally blow apart all of their doctrine, because they've gotten you to the point where now you value the governing body over everything else.
And the term governing body is actually a business term.
It is.
You know, they want to say they're modern day apostles. Okay, but let's just say, if you're watching this, you do actually believe in the Bible. Okay. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, the Bible is true. The modern day the apostles of old were actually inspired and personally taught by Jesus. Okay. The governing body in 2017 fully admitted that they are not inspired. So then how are they the modern day apostles if they are not actually inspired the way that the apostles of old were?
Well, they're not infallible.
Way too many questions.
I know. Stop it. You got to quit thinking logically.
Stop it, Wendy. You're just a woman. You're just a woman.
It's like they say, the governing body is neither infallible or perfect.
Right.
And then on the other side, they're like, they may say that we need to do things that make no sense from human standpoint to do it anyway. You know, like, you say the two, it's like, come on. But the last thing that I'll say regarding, like, waking up and then feeling like, well, this is right, was I remember they came over. It was two elders. And the sad thing is, the one elder that came over was somebody that I brought into the truth. I knocked on his door and I'm like, oh, and I really want to get into the guilt that I feel about all the judicial committees that I was on, where I disfellowshipped people. And I was like, what am I doing, even when I was doing it? But you just felt the pressure because you had two other men there with you. And I'm like, I remember I wrote text to people, because I still had their confirmation or their information numbers, like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm sorry. Never got a reply back, but because it weighed heavy on me. I'm like, geez, did I ruin this person's life? But
How
anyway,
long were you an elder?
from 2006 to 2014, 8 years, and on a treadmill that just was going all the time. And, and I had in the back of my mind, I didn't want to be like my father who burned out and quit. I was like, I don't want to be a quitter because I didn't like what he did. And then I'm like, maybe you should have quit earlier. But the elders came over and I said, here's the problem I have. The blood transfusion, the blood doctrine. I said, mother's breast milk has more white blood cells in it than our regular blood, which includes plasma and white blood cells and red blood cells and hemoglobin and all that. And I was like, why would God create the perfect nutrient mix for a newborn that a mother produces that has a high concentration of white blood cells in it? And yet 3 years ago, I watched a mother die on a hospital bed because she couldn't get white blood cells because she was suffering from leukemia. And I watched her die with her 3 children around her. And I remember it was like, I think back on it, I had cognitive dissonance for many years. I just didn't put it all together. I remember being in the hospital going, what's going on here? Like they literally could have saved her. But anyway, so I used that logic with them and they were like, well, from time to time, they may say things that aren't right or wrong. And it says, that's not up to us. And it says, ultimately, think about this. I remember him saying this. He looked at me, he's like, Jared, that's why we have the resurrection hope, because it'll fix anything, even if there was a mistake. And I remember looking at them cold and I was like, no, because that resurrection doesn't take away the immediate pain of like those kids crying because their mama's gone. And, it's just like the cold heartedness and just, they're all company men. And the thing is I know I'm not that guy. I'm not going to rat everybody out because I'm like, they'll have to take their own medicine one day. But there's so many evil men that are hiding so much evil, and it's going to get revealed in its own time. You can't hide from karma. That was one of the final nails in the coffin. Going back to when I said I was in the shower praying, like, just give me something, tell me something. And it's like, they came over and I'm like, well, no, that didn't go how I thought it was going to go. Like, no, you just confirmed that this is all a bunch of BS and it's a cult. And, that's why I love the book Combating Cult Mind Control. I think it's a good read. There's several good books that are out there. You've pointed out some books too, but it's like, you have to find your own way. I think my story it's similar to yours and others, but I just don't want anybody to feel like they've got to conform to anyone or anything. And, if you can survive being physically out, mentally out, and fade, then do that. Just find happiness, because we don't have a guaranteed amount of time on this earth. It's terrible if you're going to spend it being miserable and stressed, because you're going to have that stress anyway, right? So
I know that when people leave, there is so much hatred toward the elders.
Mm-hmm.
I am one of those people who had a horrific experience on my committees, 3 committees with the elders. And what I've realized since being on this side, after the story you just told, the trauma that you men endure from being elders and told that the Holy Spirit had appointed you, it's really horrific what you guys endured in that organization. And I just think that more people need to understand that, sure, there are some terrible people in that organization and some terrible elders, but they too are victims, just happen to be men who happen to be appointed, who happen to be following the rules, who happen to also succumb to it.
Yeah.
And maybe I was lucky as a woman to not have that position of authority. And maybe if I was a man and appointed as an elder, maybe I would have not been a very good version of myself. So thank you for being so honest in the things that you said. And welcome. I hope more people on the XJW community show more compassion for the men who had position of authority, regardless of what they went through, because we all have a different experience, but the same organization. If you could talk to an earlier Jared in the audience, because he's there. We have so many men who are family heads, husbands that are PMO. What would you say to him?
I think the first thing that I would say is always put the needs of your family and your children ahead of anything else. And you keep doing that, see where it gets you. If it pushes you out from that organization, it makes you wonder and it makes you think. And also never forsake your personal well-being, because, you know, they teach like, oh, you're being selfish. And I'm like, but self-love is not selfish. You can't help anybody from a position of weakness. You have to strengthen yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically in order to be a point where you can help others. I mean, look at you, you know, as a mom, right? You gotta, you know, you get drained, but it's like if you don't pour into yourself, who's going to do it? And if you don't pour into yourself, you know, I'm sure kids pour back to you in that way, but it's like you get exhausted. It's like, and then you throw the JW life onto it. It's brutal.
Well,
like
the JW life is very toxic in that many things, but one of them being the more miserable, the more poor, the more awful you feel about yourself, the more spiritual you are, the more favorably you're looked at by people who matter, by people who matter. Their opinions matter to me. And if I was a miserable mom, if I was an exhausted mom, if I was a miserable wife, then I must be doing something right. I was taught that from a very young age. And those people who were going on their vacations once a year, and those kids who were the same age as me, whose parents let them go to college on the DL, well, they weren't spiritually strong because they weren't like I was.
That's right. That's right. Like, oh, I feel so guilty. We're on vacation and we didn't go to the meeting, you know?
Jared, thank you so much for being on the show and for your honesty and for how much you shared. I know for a fact that there are people in the audience who are going to be so inspired by this. If you want to reach out to Jared, feel free to do so. All of his stuff is in the description box. And if you want to be on the show and share your story, you can go to wendyrenee.com/share your story and the schedule will pop right up. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for watching.